It's a nice energy for people to enter on, being giggly. Laura, I like your background also.
Thank you. It's to distract from my otherwise appearance.
Good morning. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here on the end of this snowy week on Friday morning, 9:30. We're going to wait a few minutes for others to join us. We have folks, sort of streaming into the waiting room that we're letting into this main session. So if you just sit tight for a few moments, we'll get started in a couple of minutes. But welcome. You are in the Chicago Wilderness Alliance Initiative Team 5 meeting, increasing equitable access to nature. And we're going to get started in just a few minutes. We have a lot of folks who registered for the session this morning, so it'll take a little bit of time for us to get everybody in. But welcome and sit tight. Good morning. Welcome to those of you who have just joined us in the main room. It is great to see so many folks, so many smiling faces and or names of people who are not on camera on the screen in front of us. We're going to get started in just a couple minutes. We've got multiple people streaming into the waiting room and coming into the main room. So we want to wait until that slows down and we have a critical mass in the main room before we get going. So go ahead, take a sip of coffee, go grab a cup of tea. We'll get started in just a couple minutes.
Also, for ease of facilitation today, since we have such a large group, if everyone could put their name and pronouns and your organization, if you'd like, in your username, that would be super helpful for us. Thank you so much.
Good morning. For those of you who just entered, we're going to get started in just a few minutes. Thank you all for being here. It's great to see such a great group. This is going to be a very interactive session today. We're going to have lots of opportunity to hear and learn from you. We're going to queue up some questions. We're going to allow for some really great discussion, hopefully, and capture that. So we're looking forward to a very sort of lively and engaged session this morning over the next 90 minutes. We're going to get started in just a couple minutes. It's wonderful to see so many familiar names and faces up on the screen. And we are currently sitting at 45 participants and counting, which is just fantastic. We're glad to see so many people joining us on what is now here on the north side of Chicago, a snowy and blustery morning. It was a sunny morning about an hour ago. We're going to start in just about a minute. Okay, it looks like the streaming into the waiting room for today's Zoom has slowed down. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Radhika to get us started with the welcome.
Thank you, Brandon. Good morning, everybody. My name is Radhika Muralia. I'm the program director at Friends of the Forest Preserves. And I'm also the co-chair of the Increasing Equitable Access Initiative of Chicago Wilderness. Really, just kind of blown away by the great response to our session this morning. I'm so glad you're all here. We have a lot of work to do and a lot of visionary and practical conversations to have with you this morning on some really difficult topics. So I just want to make sure that you all take care of yourselves and take some deep breaths and center yourself on these conversations, because we need, this is an alliance-wide effort, and so we need everybody to be in that space with us. So I want to express gratitude for all of you who have been joining our meetings over the past couple of years. We've laid a really strong foundation for this work. We've worked on language and goals and strategies. We've heard a lot from community members through our community spotlights, and hopefully those have inspired you to take action in your own work. Because today we are going to be all about action. We are going to be all about moving into action mode with our initiative, and we need your help to identify what those actions will be and how we can be successful. And so I'll hand it back over to Brandon in a second. I just want to take a moment to, as you're centering yourself on this topic, I just wanted to mention something I heard from Aiko Bethia recently. And I would like everyone to use this as a frame for your work today and on JEDI issues. We need, as professionals, we really need to stop making a business case for why diversity, equity, inclusion is important. It is a human issue, and we need to do the right thing in our work, not only because it improves our outcomes, but because it's the right thing and it's the right way to treat each other and the communities that we work with. So I just would ask you all to keep that in mind as you are, putting yourself forward into helping us develop some really concrete actions. Okay, I will hand it back over to Brandon, and I look forward to working with you all.
Thank you, Radhika. Before I give a brief overview of the day and sort of where we are in terms of having a conversation broadly with the Chicago Wilderness Alliance, just wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping. We will today be using a couple of facilitation tools, virtual facilitation tools, to move the conversation forward. And we will at one point be going into breakouts. If you have any trouble, any technical difficulties, know that the four of us who are hosting the call today and sort of leading the conversation, Laura Riley from Chicago Wilderness, Radhika, Danny, and I are here to help. Mostly Laura in particular is here to help with any technical issues. So if you do have any issues, please do feel free to reach out to Laura. We're going to be somewhat informal. It's okay to turn your mic on and sort of speak into the room today. We want to hear voices. So do know that. And we would encourage, as you're able and comfortable, especially when we do move into breakout rooms or into sort of large group conversation, it'd be great to see your faces. Again, if you're comfortable. We know that Zoom can be intrusive into your living space or your working space, but if you are comfortable, it'd be great to see faces when we are having those conversations. So again, we are here to help things move smoothly, and we'll be doing some check-ins on the technology front as we move along. Okay, so what I would love to do is just, those of you who know me know that I am not a big fan of slides in virtual meetings, but I am going to go ahead and share a quick slide here because I do want to ground the work today in the Green Vision initiatives of the Chicago Wilderness Alliance. And for those of you who are newer to the Alliance, maybe joining us because of going to Congress for the first time, or joining us because you're interested in the topic today and wanted to be involved in this really important conversation, know that it is the Chicago Wilderness Alliance that is a change. It's embracing the sort of network model that is Chicago Wilderness, and that we are an alliance of organizations and agencies all working together toward shared initiatives for conservation and how we live in this place we call the Chicago Wilderness region, that extends into 4 states from Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan. I wanted to orient you. I'm definitely not going to read all of that lovely text that is on the screen right now, but feel free to peruse it while I'm chatting if you'd like. But I do want to point out for those of you who are new to the conversation or just returning to the conversation, that Chicago Wilderness Alliance is oriented in its work around 7 green vision initiatives that flow together. They are interconnected. They are numbered for convenience, not for importance. So it doesn't mean that managing healthy landscapes is, number 1, the most important, and protecting healthy waters, number 7, the least important. As you can see in the way that they're represented on the slide, that they do flow from one into the other. They are interconnected in all sorts of ways. And a lot of times, the separation of them into these 7 initiatives as opposed to one larger initiative is for convenience and a way to move the work forward in these specific areas. Today, of course, we are talking about increasing equitable access to nature, and we're going to have the type of conversation that's being had, across the Chicago Wilderness region, but also across the country, and really in a lot of ways across the world in this moment. So in this conversation, we are connecting to really big themes and impulses in conservation, in environmental justice, in the way that we live on this planet. And as we think about the impacts of climate, decreasing biodiversity, and so many different issues literally across the globe. One thing that Radhika alluded to that is really going to be the focus of this conversation today is that both, here in the Chicago Wilderness Alliance, in this team, and then also sort of across conversations that have been had in all sorts of sectors over the past several years, that there's been a lot of conversation about diversity, equity, inclusion, access, equity, all of these sort of really important buzzwords, but they are words. And we are in a mode for the Alliance and for this team in particular in our conversation today of moving from word into action. We really want to drill down and talk about what does it mean to act on these initiatives? What does it mean to act on these impulses? And what can we do at an alliance level? And also what can we do at individual levels too? So it is this shift from orienting ourselves around what I sometimes like to call book club mode in talking about these issues into action mode. And that's where we are centering the work today. So that's a very, very brief overview of where we are. All of the initiatives are moving into an action mode. That is something that is happening across the Alliance. And as part of that, I'll just do a plug for a series of cafes that we are doing, hopefully attracting a broader audience into the work of the Alliance. We had the Managing Healthy Landscapes Cafe last week. And at noon today, if, an hour and a half this morning, if you want to add another hour of Chicago Wilderness good conversation to your Friday on this snowy day, do join us at noon for a cafe that's going to talk about taking climate action and digging into some of the priorities there. And there will be other cafes and other conversations around the other initiatives coming out over the next couple of months. So do look out for those. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Danny to update us sort of where we are and give some context for the conversation.
Thanks, Brandon, and hi, everyone. Good morning. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Danny Aboud. I use they, them pronouns, and I am the Director of Community Programs and Partnerships for Brushwood Center at Ryerson Woods. My work focuses on doing community engagement, making sure people have equitable access to both nature and the arts because of the wellness that it brings us. So I'm very passionate about this initiative. I joined the Initiative 5 group, I think in 2021. So I was there for a lot of the meetings where we we refined the goal and strategy language. And then I took over as co-chair for Amy Rosenthal alongside Radhika in November of last year. So this is an exciting time, I think, for us to be shifting from this place of conversation to action, as Brandon alluded to, not just because of the, kind of position we're in the environmental world in general, but also the Alliance has been digging into doing a lot more justice and equity focused strategizing, specifically through our Jedi Roadmap initiative, which I co-chair along with Raquel Garcia Alvarez, who I think is also on. So hey, Raquel, feel free to drop anything in the chat if I miss anything. But I wanted to give you kind of a quick update on kind of the extent of that work. So to go off of what Brandon's talking about in the way that the Alliance is structuring the initiatives and again, this energy of moving from this book club phase into actual action and how we can utilize our resources as an Alliance to move different issues forward in our region. I want to talk a little bit about the recent updates with the Roadmap Committee, which I think aligns very naturally with the goals that we have as Initiative 5, as a group focused on increasing equity and engagement in accessing nature. So briefly, I'll just say, if you haven't been keeping up, the last few months we've been pushing an audit for members to take, which we can link in the chat. If your organization hasn't filled it out, we would really love your feedback. But we're kind of starting from saying, what do we have? We know there's a lot of resources between our various organizations. We know there's a lot of really strong things happening in the region, and we know there's also a lot of room for improvement. We know there's a lot of folks who are interested in pushing forward their equity and accessibility, but don't necessarily have resources, don't know where to start. Again, that shift from conversation into action can be tricky, and we know that there's stumbling blocks along the way. So the audit is meant to be an internal audit for each of our partner organizations to take a look and say, where are we at in our Jedi practices? Not what are we saying about it, not what do we want to be doing, but what structures do we have in place? What programmatically do we have in place? What resources do we need, and what resources do we have to share? This is kind of helping us establish a baseline across the Alliance to help decide where we want to put our energy in increasing equitable access, right? We need to know what we have and who needs what before we can just start doing things to make any kind of difference or impact. And so we've had about 20 different organizations fill it out so far. So again, if your organization hasn't, we would love your feedback. We only need one response from each group to just help give a baseline. It's something I recommend doing with your team as a way of kind of doing an internal audit of your Jedi practices. I think it's a great thing to do at the beginning of the year to help set goals for your organization in terms of ways you can grow in these practices. And I'm happy to talk with anybody else personally, one-on-one, happy to consult with teams as they fill it out. Just let me know. But from what we've gotten so far, a lot of what we're seeing is that folks are wanting to put more energy into these spaces. There are some really great policies and procedural guidelines coming out of some organizations. Others are lacking the capacity, both in funding and in people power, to put together some of these bigger documents and strategies. And with that in mind, I think it's kind of helping to frame our conversation today. Again, I was on the calls where we kind of formulated our goals and strategies for this group. And I think as we're shifting from this place of conversation to action, it's becoming clear that some of our strategies aren't really as actionable as we'd like them to be. And so something we're hoping to get today is kind of consensus and feedback from folks about where our energy is, where people are doing work in the same vein as the audit. What do we have? What do we want to get? And how can we work together to make these things broadly accessible? How can we create resources for our Alliance, for our region, that help advance the accessibility and equity of our green and blue spaces for everybody? So with that, I want to stop talking because I've been saying a lot of things, and I'd love to get a pulse from folks. We're going to use a tool called Mentimeter. Many of you are probably familiar with it, but I just want to hear from y'all. What are you able to give in this initiative, and what are you looking to get? I'm really curious in terms of the idea of increasing equitable access to nature, your own organization's Jedi practices, your personal skill sets. What are you able to give, and what are you hoping to get from participating in this initiative, just to help us kind of get a baseline as we're setting these new strategies going forward? So what everyone's going to do is go to menti.com and use this code on the screen, 5175-0114. You can do it on a phone or on your browser. And you're going to be able to respond to this question, and we can see the answers as they come in. So we can kind of start to see where's the energy in this group, where are resources, where are people passionate about, and then based on those responses, we'll be breaking up into breakout rooms to have further conversations around these different pieces. Brandon, did I miss anything?
No, but it would be great to offer space for anyone who might have a question about either the process of going to Menti and putting in the code, or if you have any sort of questions about sort of the question. So any clarifications, please do feel free to turn your mic on, speak into the room, or ask your question in the chat. And also Laura has put the URL and the code in the chat too.
And you can submit, I think, multiple responses to this too. So feel free, if you think of something else and you want to add it, you can come back and add it again. And if you have any questions about anything we were talking about too, feel free to put something
And
in
I
the
would,
chat.
yeah, I would just advise if you could label what you can give. And do you want them separate, Brandon? If you want them to say give and get, or just throw out the ideas?
I think, yes, identifying what is the give and what is the get will be really useful in a couple of ways. I think both so we understand so for instance, the person who put tactical ways to incorporate Jedi in short-term and long-term in very traditional white-led organizations. I think that it would be great if we knew if that was something that the person wanted to get from this conversation. So are you looking for those tactical strategies, or if it's something that you can offer into the group, that you have tactical strategies to offer? So Radhika, I think that's a great question and a clarification that if you could let us know what's the give and what's the get. We now know that tactical strategies is something where somebody has energy that will inform how we do the breakout rooms. That's how we move the conversation forward. So we're working on a few different levels and layers in terms of the conversation today. Thank you, Radhika. That was a really, really, really good clarification.
Yeah, awesome. There's a lot of great things rolling in already. So we're going to give a few minutes for folks to respond to these prompts, and we will start to think about what's coming forward and how we want to structure our continued conversations today. Seeing a lot already coming out about sharing kind of best practices and resources, both as a give and get for people, folks who want to contribute what they're doing and want to know what others are doing, which is great. I think this is an area that as an initiative, we've been doing a lot already, which is cool. If you've been joining us for the last year, you've probably come for our community spotlights, trying to highlight different programs that are being great leaders in this way across our region. So that's really cool to see. Seems like we have a lot of folks too in this group that have really strong community connections. I'm seeing people mentioning having connections to community voice, to having that sense of what different communities are interested in, which is really cool to see as well. I love watching these like very well articulated and thoughtful comments come through. I'm really appreciating everybody's time and effort here. Someone's hoping for a multiple choice question. That's fair. But also, I think in the sense of what Radhika was getting to earlier, needing to think beyond just DEI and a strategic business orientation, but really about justice work, about how we increase our influence, not only as organizations, but as people, how we expand communities, how we create kind of a morally just society in the outdoors. I kind of want to push people to have to think a little harder today. It might make some people uncomfortable, and that's very okay. It's good to learn to sit with that discomfort because it's where you find growth. And recall too that people who are traditionally marginalized from spaces, people who experience structural racism and inequities, are uncomfortable all of the time. So we can find space to sit in that discomfort a little bit.
And for the person who wants a multiple choice option, it's coming. because you'll be able to choose which breakout room you go into. So we're going
Yes.
to group breakout rooms by the different themes that emerge from the conversation to have a deeper dive. So you will literally get to choose, from a multiple choice list, which room in conversation you dive into as we move forward in the conversation today.
Absolutely. I'm also seeing a couple different comments relating to data and ways to measure progress to kind of track the way we move towards goals. And I think that would be a really great group to have some folks in this meeting have conversations around. I know we have some of our great data-minded folks here. And as we're getting in all this data from I just said data and data, I'm so sorry. As we're getting in all this information from the audit, we will really be relying on folks to help us figure out ways to utilize and interpret this information. How can we take these resources and things we're getting from folks? How can we visualize it in a way that's helpful? How can we best share these resources? And how can we see kind of the emerging themes and find ways to connect people around where the energy is? So I would love to have a breakout discussion, I think, around tracking metrics, data, and how that moves this work forward, if people are interested. Someone said they give a fantastic attitude, and I gotta say, I like that. That makes me happy. We love a good attitude. Yeah, a couple of different things about technology and surveys. I think data, tech, and surveys could be a really great breakout conversation group for some folks. Along with, and feel free, Radhika and Brandon, to chime in, I think best practices in terms of community engagement. I know I saw Lorena Lopez on here. I know that she's currently finishing up putting together a really stunning document of best practices from different practitioners across the region. So not to put you on the spot, Lorena, but I think I'm gonna have to get you in a room like that to talk about that. I think we'll give maybe 1 more minute, 1 or 2 more minutes maybe.
A couple of other themes that I'm seeing rise up in addition to best practices and resources, and then data, tech, and surveys. I've seen program adaptation as a theme that's coming up, where there could be some interesting conversation today. I'm seeing community interests, so sort of, and I might actually use the sort of my facilitator's privilege to switch that around a little bit to maybe listening to communities as a way to think about that. And then also sort of general knowledge and ideas, which may be a little bit different from best practices and resources, but maybe we'll think about that a bit. And then building connections and partnerships, I think, is another theme that I've seen come out. But curious if there are things that Danny and Radhika and I are not speaking into the room in terms of themes that folks are seeing rising up in the conversation on Menti. Please do feel free to voice them by turning your mic on or dropping them into the chat. Because again, we will be building the breakout rooms based on these themes that we're seeing come up in the Menti resource.
I would love to hear more about this word resources. If I don't know if we're able to edit your response or maybe add a new response in terms of what specific resources you're looking for. Is it financial? Is it time? Is it books to read? Is it, recommendations for consultants? If there's any way technologically, or maybe just put them in the chat to define those a little more, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we have a lot of folks on here too that have a variety of great resources. And again, as we're parsing through the roadmap or the audit data, it's a great thing for us to keep in mind, kind of grouping together the resources people are comfortable sharing into those different buckets.
And one other thing that's important contextually as we have the conversation today is that from multiple angles, in particularly some of the funding that's coming from the federal government, from some pretty big buckets, is that we hope to have some financial resources to be able to move some of this work forward. So some of this move into action, particularly for this initiative team, is predicated on the being able to bring some financial resources and some capacity resources to the work. So it isn't just being in a mode of we're a network, we're an alliance, we're a volunteer oriented entity, sort of like what can we do in addition to the work that we're already doing, but it is also the idea of being able to leverage some resources for this work as we move into an action mode.
Absolutely. I also want to just lift up, I'm seeing in this a recent addition is ideas on how to make hiring practices more equitable. And I want to let folks know, if you're interested, there's a group of us who are starting to plan some support and programming for emerging professionals, including trainings for senior level staff on how to best support young people in the workplace, and including hiring practices and equitable treatment of emerging professionals in your organization. So if you're interested at all in joining those conversations as we start to plan that out, please let us know, drop your email in the chat, contact Laura. We're trying to start getting some things organized around that. There's a lot of energy around that out of Congress. So there's lots of ways to move on that. And also I think that would be a really cool thing to house out of this initiative, since it is so aligned with a lot of the things I'm seeing here. But I'm jumping the gun. I'll stop. I think we've gotten a lot of responses though. Brandon, do you think we're ready to start building breakout rooms? Or you want to give it a few minutes?
I think we are ready to start building breakout rooms. And Laura, thank you in advance for helping us do that. I've captured in our facilitator document what we've sort of surfaced as some of those breakout room themes. So for those of you who are in the main room with us on the call, please do continue to ask any questions, give voice to things either in the chat or in the main room, and bear with us for just a moment while we build 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 breakout rooms. And again, once those are live, you will have the ability to join the breakout room of your choice. If you are on a smaller screen, the breakout rooms, once they become live, will potentially be hidden behind the More option at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And you'll see when they become live, we'll let you know. Like I will say, oh, they are ready to go. You can join the rooms, but also you'll see a red alert button come up, and then you'll click on More, and then the breakout rooms will come up. If you are having any trouble joining a breakout room of your choice, please do let us know in the chat, and any of the 4 of us can manually move you into the room. You will also, let's say you want to have conversation around 2 of these areas, or maybe 3 of these areas, you are able to move from one room to the other. So once you're in a room, you can bounce to a different room to kind of check out and sample a bit of the conversation. If you have any trouble doing that, you can always come back to the main room, and one of us will be here in the main room at all times to sort of greet folks and sort of make sure that everyone is okay and knows where they're going. And we're happy to, again, to physically, move you into the room of your choice. So do know that we are here to help. We want to make this nice and smooth as possible. Any questions, comments, or concerns about sort of the mechanics of what we're about to do? And I realized that we didn't say how long you're going to be in the rooms for. So we're envisioning about 20 minutes in the rooms. Radhika and Danny and I will bounce around a little bit in the rooms, just sort of, listen in on the conversation, sort of see where the energy is, if it feels like folks need a little bit more time, or if things are wrapping up before that 20-minute mark, we'll adjust as needed. After we're in these breakout conversations, we're going to come back into the main room. And Danny, how would you like folks to think about reporting out as we come back into the main conversation?
Yeah. I was just going to say, if somebody in each breakout room would volunteer to be the note taker of their session, that would be amazing. However, it is easiest for you to take notes. You can share them with me directly after the meeting, but it would be great if we could have somebody volunteer to be a note taker, and it doesn't have to be the same person. But when we come back, also, there'll be another Menti slide and an opportunity to share out some of your key themes and conversation items through the same thing of just kind of joining that room, entering your comment, and we'll see them kind of scrolling up on the screen. So probably best for the note taker to be the one that fills out the at the end, but we'll circle up and I'll give instructions on that when we come back together, if that makes sense.
And I'm super
and
thrilled. Oh, sorry, Radhika, please.
I just want to, lay out, unless you were going to move into this, Brandon, what the task at hand is, what should be the guiding question for your breakout rooms. And again, we want conversation, but we really, really want action. So if you could frame your thinking, before I keep going, Brandon, were you going to get into this? Am I jumping the gun? Okay. Before you, introduce yourselves, make connections, form those connections with each other. And then under your theme, just please list out what types of actions can be taken under these themes, or, in the same vein, like what are you doing already, or what have you seen done, or what do you think needs to be done? Wherever you are in your journey in that theme, please contribute that to the group. And then I would think those would be the answers that you would be reporting out. Maybe Danny, if you want to actually read out the question that you'll be asking afterwards, that might help direct people.
That's a very good idea. I think the other thing to focus on too is beyond, definitely please talk about what your organization is doing, what you personally think people should be doing, but also what can we do as an alliance? What do we as a group of folks who all have our own organizations, who all have our own projects, who are coming together as volunteers with what we know is limited capacity and resources, but still really great, strong resources and some really amazing talent in this room. What can we do together? What can we build? What can we provide? How can we visualize data and resources? How can we put out programs or cafes or things together that would get at these goals? So really try and think about that. I think it's great to think big ideas. What are you doing? What would you love to see done? And kind of wrap it up by thinking about what can we do? What can we come together and do? And what should be the strategies and goals going forward for this initiative under these different ideas, if that makes sense. So I'll drop in the chat kind of those ideas, what are you doing? What would you like to see done? And what can we do together?
I am thrilled that we've moved into talking about breakout rooms, and we have not had a drop off of folks from the meeting. So that's fantastic. Really glad to see that. Laura, curious, how are we coming with building the breakout rooms?
I have the 7 breakout rooms. I just don't have the titles. Do you want to tell me? I can rename them real quickly, but they're all ready to go.
If you could rename them, we need a best practices and research. I'll put them in the chat.
Sure.
So that folks can be thinking about their rooms. There you go. If you bear with us for just a moment longer while Laura names the rooms, then we will open them up. Think about where you want to go. And if you all end up in the same room, great. If we, end up in 2 rooms, great too. It'll be great to see sort of where folks' energy is for the conversation today. Again, once the room's open, we're planning on about 20 minutes in the rooms. Again, we can adjust, as I said, as we move forward.
I'm also throwing in the chat, as you think specifically about actions we can take in as an alliance. Something we're trying to really push is that all of the goals and actions that we start to really solidify. So this doesn't have to be what comes out today, but kind of keeping in mind the idea of SMARTY goals, and that's an acronym that stands for strategic, measurable, actionable, realistic. I put reasonable. Sorry, it's ambitious and realistic. I always mess this up. Time-bound, inclusive, and equitable. So thinking about goals that are within all of these things that are strategic, they're measurable, they are ambitious. So we are pushing ourselves to do something, right? Moving from that place of action or that place of conversation to action. They are realistic. So it's something we can do, time-bound, and inclusive and equitable. I will correct my haphazard typing there in the chat so you have the actual acronym. My bad.
So for those of you who are torn between multiple themes and breakout rooms too, if you don't want to jump around, Brandon put it really well when we were talking about this exercise yesterday, in terms of like all these things are really important. Where is your, but in order to help focus and move toward action, just try and really identify where your own energy is really, really hot. Where are you motivated? Where do you have momentum? Or where do you have like the greatest challenge that you want to dedicate time to? So where is your energy? And we really want to capitalize on the energy in order to tease out some priorities for this group. So it'll really help us understand where the energy is just based on your choices of where to
Okay,
go.
we are ready to go. Thank you so much for your patience.
Perfect.
Shall I open the rooms?
That sounds great, Laura. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
The breakout rooms are open. Again, if you have a larger screen, you'll see the breakout room option there at the bottom of the Zoom window. If your screen is a little bit smaller, it's behind the More button. Go ahead and open that up, and you can select which of the rooms to join. If you are having any difficulty at all getting into the room that you would like to get into, or would like us to manually move you into a room, please just let us know into the chat, or just turn your mic on and speak into the main room. We are happy to physically move you into the room of your choice. Have a wonderful conversation. We're excited to have a listen in, and we're excited to hear what everyone talks about when we come back after about 20 minutes. Again, if it seems like there's a lot of energy, we'll let it go a little bit longer. If it seems like folks are kind of wrapping up, we'll bring you back a little bit sooner. And this is great. It looks like we have at least 2 people in each of the breakout rooms so far. For those of you who are just joining us, I know that a couple of you just came in from the waiting room. We are moving into breakout rooms based on themes, and those themes you'll see as the title of the breakout rooms. And we're asking folks to think about sort of actions, have some conversations about actions that we can take as an alliance, as individuals, as organizations in each of those themes. So if you were just joining us, that's what's happening at the moment. Folks are going into breakout rooms.
And if you need help, yeah, let us know. We're happy to move you around. I'm gonna jump into the listening to communities group first. I don't know, Brandon and Radhika, where you guys want to head, but I'll plan on hopping around from there, just kind of checking out where you're at and trying not to overlap.
I'm going to go ahead and get our attendee on iPhone into program adaptation. There you go. Anybody else in the main room who needs help moving into one of the breakout rooms? And Terry, I think what we're seeing here in the main room might be a ghost of you, because I see that you've also joined us via phone, and I suspect you are in the room of your choice that way.
Yeah, I'm just transitioning from phone to my computer, so give me a second to straighten myself out.
Perfect, sounds great. If you need any assistance at all, just holler.
I'm really loving where people's heads are at and the energy. It's very exciting. I will say, being a part of a lot of like equity focused conversations over the years, you get used to people kind of saying the same few things every meeting. But today I was hearing like very new, different ideas, like very actionable, cool, excited, people excited about things we could do together. And I'm super excited by that. So I just want to thank you all for your time and effort on these conversations. I'm super jazzed about where we're going.
We are back. Thank you, everybody. It seemed like things went fairly smoothly, and from what we could hear bouncing around in some of the rooms, some really great conversations, which I think you heard Danny expressing that sentiment as you all were coming back into the room. Danny, I'm going to turn it over to you maybe to begin the debrief conversation.
So as I was saying, as people were coming back, I'm really excited because I think I was hearing a lot of things I didn't expect to hear, ideas and conversations around, different components, feedback on different aspects of like what CW is already doing, which is really helpful for us especially like as we're, as Brandon's working to help restructure and strategize the initiatives, and I'm working with the roadmap group with Raquel. Like these are all really, really helpful conversations for us to be getting information from. And to that end, I hope folks are taking notes. I asked a few people when I hopped around if there were note takers in groups, but we're going to use Mentimeter again to kind of share out and for us to be able to capture a lot of those ideas. So if folks would be able to go to menti.com again and use the code on the screen, 5175-0114, to kind of drop in what your group discussed or things you're excited about. The four of us took some notes too as we were hopping from room to room, but we know we didn't capture everything. So we'd love for you to kind of share out, mostly on the idea of like, what can we do together? Like, what are you excited about? What are you energized by? We're trying to track where that energy is so we can help really coordinate around these different goals that emerge where there's already excitement and kind of build off of that momentum rather than trying to like push people into something where there's really not the time or spirit around it. So if you want to join this group and kind of share out, just like before, you can put in multiple comments. So if you think of something else, you can always come back and add it. But we're going to be using all of these responses where we can capture all this data and kind of pour over it as a group too in the future. So this is a really helpful way to share out. You're also welcome to drop things in the chat, questions. If people want to come off mute and talk too, feel free to like raise your hand and we can, Brandon, I think we can call on people, right? And have people chat too. But
that sounds great. And, we've sort of tasked the note takers with dropping some of the ideas into Menti, but would love to, to hear, some of the conversations, some of the things that folks found most interesting or most vibrant in your conversations. We would love to sort of hear that as a conversation in the room. So if anyone's willing to go first, while we're also capturing a Menti and sort of seeing where things are going. But if you want to raise your hand, it'd be the first to sort of report out on some of what you talked about in your room. We would be very grateful. Thank you, Ted. Please go ahead.
Sure, thanks, Brandon. So we were in the knowledge room, knowledge and ideas, I think our title was. So we talked a lot about some pretty big stuff, but it was mostly around redlining, migration, and corporate investment, and how those swirled about, and how we need to know more knowledge about some things, and how some of our knowledge might be outdated. Specifically, Terry Horton shared a study that she's working on and can't share with us because it's in that super quiet pre-publication phase. But her main point was that we mistake often that redlining still goes on. So there's historic and continuing redlining, number one. Number two is there is not just past damage from this, but continual damage from this. And we need to understand and differentiate the past from the current. And we don't know that. We're learning that we don't know that really well because it's still continuing. Same thing with investment. We talked about a lot about kind of food deserts and this idea about how in Chicago, in the South and West sides, you hear about food deserts, and then a store chain will go in with a property. It will last 2 or 3 years, and then it will come out, and there'll be the cycle starting again, right? So how do we stop that cycle in the traditional wheel diagram of plan, implement, monitor, and then replan and change? And we don't see that social change, even though this pattern has been happening for 20 years now. So that's the kind of stuff that we talked about. And finally, I will close with the important point is that wouldn't it be great if the hub could be used as some data facility or data capture to understand these terms? Because, migration, we have community migration, we have climate migration, we have migration and gentrification for different reasons. So if we could use the hub in a way to not only understand this, but to create work and programs and efforts that counteract this. How's that for a start?
Great. I think that's a strong start for sure.
And Danny, I will type these up and send them to you later today or early next week.
Gorgeous. Gold star for Ted. If anyone else wants a gold star, send me your notes. And you can also get a shout out. Oh, sorry. That's awesome. Thanks so much for sharing, Ted. And I'm really excited, Terry, to hear more about that paper as you pursue publication. That's really cool. Seeing a lot of great stuff coming into Menti too, as Ted was sharing, a lot of conversations around hiring. Again, want to plug, we have this emerging professionals focus coming up. So please let us know if you'd like to join those conversations. We want to really get a well-rounded group helping to create these opportunities, both to support emerging professionals and to make sure that the organizations are prepared to support emerging professionals by having training for senior professionals. Nicole, feel free to come off of mute.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Nicole, and I was part of the partnership group. And the themes that we started out with, there were quite a few. One, many of us recognize that we know that our programs, participation in our programs are not representative of the communities or the areas that we serve. So that was a big thing that started us off. And then we also some of us talked about how we are setting aside funding specifically to expand out accessibility to our programs, and that can mean a lot of different things. So, you know, translation, literally transportation, you know, going out into communities. Park District is doing a play bus that they're driving around to communities. So that was something we talked about, and also recognizing that we know we have to be creative and our tools and approaches and moving beyond the conventional practice of conservation, instead of inviting people in to participate, thinking about ways to go to people to participate, again with the nature play example, and actually doing, you know, one-on-ones, going within communities, building relationships, buying people coffee. And then as a next step, identified for the CW, recognizing that sometimes when communities tell us what they want and need might not align with what we can give them. And, you know, sometimes that might mean like what people are asking of us is mission creep, and how do we deal with that? And also, you know, many of us are in government or other types of bureaucracy, so navigating that as well. And I don't know, partnership group, please chime in if there is something else I missed, Jacob. And thanks.
Thanks so much, Nicole. I'm going to actually stop sharing my screen because I would love to be able to see people better. And I will share again after a little bit, after we get some more Menti comments in. Mario, I saw your drop in the chat. Thank you. I will enter your stuff into Menti. I don't know why it kicked you out. That's really rude of it, and I'm sorry. But it looks like the data group talked a lot about using Indigenous knowledge and practice to inform ecological change monitoring, making citizen and community science more appealing by pulling in things like Pokemon and drones. Very cool. What social factors should go into setting priority sites for community and expert-driven ecological work. Tools exist to help with deciding on trail improvements, and maybe these could be helpful in thinking about social factors to influence access to nature location decisions. Totally. I think too, I know, Mario, we've talked about having conversations around green gentrification, and I've seen that mentioned in the Menti a couple of times. So lots of cool energy around these things.
Yeah, that was exciting to see.
Yeah.
There's also been some talk about potentially doing a cafe for this initiative around green gentrification. So if there's energy and we want to have that conversation, we have a really great platform to be able to do that. Maybe we'll begin to set a date and move that conversation forward in that context.
Yes, absolutely. Amazing. Other folks, other comments?
Noreen, your hand is raised.
Hi, thanks. Let me lower that hand. I tried to take notes in my group and I put some stuff into the Mentimeter, but I'll just try to recap here. I was in the listening to communities group, which obviously is a very broad topic and a really important one. And we talked about a lot of different things. Let's see, we talked a lot about, not necessarily knowing the best ways to approach new organizations in a way that doesn't seem like it's just procedural, like that is meaningful and resonates and really comes from a place of listening. So we talked about the importance of attending partner meetings and listening and being present. And not necessarily immediately jumping into how you think you all can work together. The importance of building trust with new partners and perhaps investing financial resources and doing that in a way that sort of shows that you have trust in these organizations, and sharing leadership on projects and initiatives. Also the struggle that some sort of more traditional conservation groups or larger organizations may have with community engagement efforts if they don't actually have staff dedicated to that specific role. And how much is it okay to sort of farm that stuff off to other organizations, or where do things get territorial? Are some people known to be better at these things than others? And then where do the groups that want to get involved but aren't, how do they fit into all of that? I think that's kind of what I captured. Anyone from my group, feel free to chime in or correct me. Thanks.
Thanks, Noreen. I saw Jackie in the chat was willing to speak for the hiring group, emerging professionals group.
Yeah, we had a lot of good discussions, different ideas that people were doing, especially with salary studies and just trying to figure out how we make sure people who are getting hired know that they can negotiate, how that works. We also talked about the needs for trainings. So one of the ideas brought up was like, what do you wish you knew going into an interview if you were an emerging professional, and then how can we train people on that, things like negotiating or just different skills that we are often looking for. We're all pulling from the same applicant pool for a lot of things, especially natural resources related. So what are the options that we can provide? And love the funding attendance of conferences or scholarships for Morton Arboretum classes. Those are all good things that get our message out, get people aware that our organizations exist and that this is a viable option for a career. Ideas for future work, or I'm not sure, maybe Chicago Wilderness already has a job board, but if we don't already have one, job board and making sure people know about that. We talked about funding software that identifies any problematic wording in job descriptions. So that's something that a lot of us would love to have, but we just haven't gotten the funding for. Doing a region-wide salary study that accounts for nonprofits versus profits versus government, and what's an appropriate amount for reasonable salaries. Another training needs specifically, we've had a lot of training so far on getting people in, but we need more on inclusion and retention. So when we get past the point of hiring, how do you support your staff to help them grow? And then just at the end, we had a short discussion on employee resource groups, that kind of, there's two sides to the coin. Are you overburdening the couple of, your diverse people that may be on staff? Or is that something that Chicago Wilderness could take the pressure off if there's people across agencies, a larger group, that share, I guess, the burden of setting it up? So that was pretty much our group discussion. Feel free to chime in, anybody else, if I missed things.
Key to clarify on the last point is that CW helping to create like affinity spaces for employees, like having groups that meet, or us having like a diversity team that helps different organizations.
More like an affinity group, I think, was what we were talking about. So it was just, so many of our organizations, if you only have one or two people in a group, is it worth it?
Yeah, so having kind of like BIPOC environmentalist support through CW, or other marginalized identities, rather than just trying to have like two people at an org come together. That makes sense. Yeah. And there's some networks in Chicago that meet already, but doing something through CW could be interesting. Absolutely. Any other folks that want to share out, or honestly, if there's anything you heard that you want to add to, any thoughts from these different pieces?
I want to offer a time check. We have about 8 minutes left, and I know, Danny, that we wanted to do a little bit of a wrap up at the end and talk about some, sort of scheduling and next steps. Not that we need to do it right this moment, but I just wanted to make sure that we save the time for that.
Brandon, keeping me accountable. Thank you. Yeah, and also again, feel free to utilize the chat to share final thoughts. And I also dropped my email in there if there's anything you want to send me notes, you want to talk more about any of these pieces, I'm always happy to connect. Radhika and I are happy to talk about, ways to incorporate some of these concepts into future meetings and how we move forward. Just to kind of talk about next steps. So we'll be working with Brandon to kind of take this info and distill it into some actionable strategies going forward for our group. Again, looking at where the energy is, where the excitement is in these conversations, and finding ways that we can continue to have us network together around these different pieces and find ways to move forward with these actionable SMARTY goals, right? Things that we can actually do, that we can measure, that are time bound, that are fun and ambitious and push us forward, but also keep us accountable to something rather than just saying we want to increase equitable access to nature, which of course we do, but how do we do that? And how can we actually start doing it through actions as an alliance, right? To that end, also
can I just do a quick plug, Danny? If anybody's really energized around that idea of helping us to do that, to help formulate, take all this information and formulate it into some strategies, please let us know. We would love additional support and new perspectives.
Absolutely. So for the last year or two, we've been meeting on a quarterly basis. And during these meetings, we were having community spotlights. So we were highlighting organizations that were doing really strong community-led work that was focused in GVI principles. And we were also providing small donations to support, grants to support those organizations' work and to thank them for sharing their information and time with us, which is really cool. But in thinking about the other ways we can move forward, I'm wondering how folks feel about the frequency of meetings with this group, about how we want to move, kind of if this time frame is good for people, like Friday mornings. I would think as we try and move into a place of more action, it'd be great to meet more regularly than on a quarterly basis, potentially monthly or bi-monthly, but I know that might be ambitious. I know we're all busy people and have a lot going on. I'm right there with you. So I'd love to have people's insights on that. We don't have to have a final consensus on that today, but would love some more feedback from folks on that as well. So let us know in the chat potentially if this is a good timeline for you. If you have a preference, we can send out kind of a regular calendar invite. And of course, if you can't make every meeting, that's okay too. We're happy to have your input and your thoughts and your energy anytime you're able to share it with us.
And Danny, all of the wonderful notes, the stuff that was captured Menti, the stuff that folks are sending to you, and all of these great ideas and information, are we going to be sharing that out with the attendees from today?
Yes, we will synthesize and share that out as well. And I'm thinking too, as we find these different areas people have energy around, there's also the potential that we have some smaller working groups that start to work on some of these sections. And maybe those are groups that meet more regularly and we still continue to come together as a larger initiative quarterly to kind of give updates on those different pieces. That might make more sense too, knowing that we might not all have the same capacity to volunteer time for these different ideas. But we might want to stay up to date and share best practices and gain, insight from what's going on in this initiative. So I think that's totally a reasonable structure as well, if that's something people are comfortable with.
Danny, I have a thought on that. The emerging professionals group is meeting Fridays at 11, and the GVI Roadmap group is meeting Fridays from 10 to 11, and this meeting is obviously a Friday. We could sort of hold that time for this work if that's helpful, and then adjust as needed.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And also, folks, if anyone's interested in learning more about the Roadmap initiative or getting involved in that, we are always happy to have more folks joining that initiative too. So again, reach out to myself or Raquel or Laura, and we're happy to get you in on any of those calendars. And I'm thinking what makes the most sense maybe is after we kind of look through these notes, identify some of these areas, and maybe start to build out. I'm seeing some yes to working groups in the comments. Some folks who are interested in meeting more regularly can kind of set their schedules, and we can continue to try and have that regular quarterly structure on Friday mornings to make sure there's time for all of us to connect. And we can find what works best for the different groups who want to work on these different action items. If there are no objections to that, I think that might make the most sense of what I'm seeing so far in the chat and people's direct messages to me. I'm seeing also a short list of actionable items that come from today would be helpful in creating the edges of working groups. Absolutely, Jacob. We will kind of build out, I think, an outline, both synthesizing the notes from today and the different ideas, and then kind of identifying those emerging themes that we saw and the actionable items that came forward, and we can start to build some kind of core crews around these different pieces and moving these pieces forward, which is really exciting. I think, again, I just want to thank everybody for your time. Thank you especially to Brandon for coming in and helping to facilitate. He's been doing so much work across all of the initiatives to help us move from this place of conversation to action. And I'm really grateful to you, Brandon, and to Bold Bison for all of your work. And Laura Riley for being the eternal Chicago Wilderness Angel. You're amazing. And all of you, again, for sharing your time and talent with us and your insights. I really appreciate everybody's contributions. Every conversation I jumped into, I heard really exciting and cool things and new ideas. And again, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to chit chat on any of these topics at any time.
And thank you, Danny, for your leadership.
Anytime. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
We'll follow up.